Good morning, everybody. Special thanks to Anton, our special guest organist today. My name is Justin Wilson. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this service at First Universalist Church of Rochester. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Please remain after, whether you're in person or online, for coffee hour, if you're in person in the Clara Barton Lounge, or online in the same Zoom link that you're in now. If you'd like to get to know us better, there is on the back of the order of service, there's a visitor form that you can fill out. There's also a QR code there. And then online in the chat, there will be a link there as well so that we can follow up with you and offer a welcome beyond what we can do this Sunday morning. If you're looking for ways to serve in our church, we have a number of ways. You can support our welcoming coffee hour by seeing MJ Curry, who's waving a fan right there. If you're interested in going beyond our Pride yesterday and supporting an LGBTQ plus social justice group, we are looking to launch that soon, so see me afterwards. And we have a number of service projects coming up which will be listed in this week email. You can also see Moritz Wagner, the head of the House Chair, or Marcy Klein, who is heading up our welcome team in order to learn more about those projects. Before we take a moment to turn towards our neighbor, let's greet our online community by waving towards the Progress Pride flag and the camera back there. We are happy you are here with us today. And if you're online, you can pop a greeting into the chat to each other. And if you're here in person, now is the time. Let's take a moment to turn towards our neighbor and offer a greeting this morning.
And as we wrap up our greetings, let's join together and sing our opening hymn, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Over and around. Baggage. It started with baptism. There was no choice in the matter. I had no voice. I was baptized into the faith of my Irish Catholic maternal family at the age of 2 weeks. My father's family was Baptist, but there would be none of that. My father made a promise at the altar to raise the children Catholic. And so it went. After baptism came the sacrament of reconciliation, the dreaded confession of sinful 6-year-old. First communion, we had to be clear of all our sins before we could receive communion. Confirmation and marriage, always faithful to the teachings of the church. It was drilled into me, and I accepted it hook, line, and sinker from parish priests, from nuns, and from my mother and my grandmother. I was a sinner, and I was going to spend all eternity in hell if I didn't toe the line. The threat of hell entered into many decisions I made as a youth and young adult. I wanted to please God and my family and find my way into heaven to be reunited with family who had gone before me. It took me raising my own daughters to turn the tide, unload the baggage. I had accumulated by that time a complete set of matched Samsonite. I raised my daughters to speak their minds, to be confident in their decisions, and to be strong young women. In their teens, my oldest refused to take the sacrament of confirmation. She was told that the bishop would not approve the confirmation name she had chosen, Sunshine. And yet she had written a very lovely verse about why she chose that name. "No problem," Katie said. "I don't want this anyway. I don't believe any of it, and I'm not going to do it." Carol and I backed her up, and that was it. And she's an atheist to this day. While our second daughter, Colleen, did receive confirmation, she's now a practicing Buddhist. I always had questions regarding my Catholic faith. Guilt, baggage, denied me from stepping away from the church. By following my girls' example, I began unpacking the baggage piece by piece. The weight of the guilt lifted, I found my way out of more than one deep, dark closet and a pathway to peace of mind. Today, I am filled with the faith I have found in this sanctuary. Hell is a thing of the past, and my late family members are with me every day. All I have to do is call them to mind. When I die, first, I'm going to the university to further research, and then be put into the ground, and that will be that, the end. I'm not going anywhere further, and I'm okay with that. Come, let us worship together. As Adam Duran comes forward to light our chalice at First Universalist, and you might light one in your homes, please join me in our chalice lighting words spoken in unison. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise now in body or in spirit for our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all.
Whoever
Today, our July Social Justice Plate offering is designated for 490 farmers. 490 farmers seek to learn alongside Rochester residents and youth to build community, hold land in common, and foster food sovereignty through urban agriculture. Guided by principles of mutual aid, they aim to steward a space where all feel welcome and integral to this mission, pushing our city toward a more resilient and equitable future. Please contribute as generously as you can to support this important work. Please place your offering in the offering basket to give online, scanning the QR code on the back of your order of service. This is also a great time to place visitor forms into the offering basket. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. Today's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Each Sunday morning, we take time with each other for the sharing of joys and concerns. When we share with one another our personal highs and lows, we enlarge our circle of love and strengthen our caring for one another. I invite you now into this sacred time where we share what's in our hearts and in our minds. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. We know so very much is going on in our world today, and if you have sorrows or joys on behalf of our national and global community, you are encouraged to do so today as well as into the future. As Tom Williams places stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All online are invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. A joy from Kathy and Jim Milch. Incredible family trip to Ireland with daughter and grandchildren. We feel fortunate to be able to keep up with a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. A sorrow from Dwight Montague. My new grandnephew Ethan has Megdal syndrome, a fatal birth defect. A joy from M.J. Curry. Many thanks to Stephen and Theo Munson, who are hosting coffee hour today and who were left out of the order of service. They even baked brownies and blondies for us. Hosts are needed for August, by the way. From Bridget Watts, Gary and I were sad to learn of the death of our longtime friend, Doug Best. From Lois and Greg Baum, we are nursing Greg's new compression fracture. He did not fall. It's that darn osteoporosis. He is slowly getting better. From Marty, a joy to be with everyone this morning, even if only by Zoom. Today we share in a community ritual to honor the many joys and sorrows we bring into this space, whether read aloud or kept in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. In a moment, those here in person are invited to come forward to drop stones into the bowl. If you need to remain seated, please raise your hand and someone can come to you with the bowl to drop stones in. If you are joining us online, please use your reaction buttons to indicate a heart and place a heart into the chat. Let us join in this collective ritual of honoring the joys and sorrows of us all. Many, many unspoken concerns and celebrations live in the heart, and we recognize each of them now, even as they are offered in silence. Now the circle of our care is drawn larger. May it increase forevermore. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. And this morning's prayer is actually a poem entitled Stuff by Wendy Barker. Who brought these pieces here? Somebody making the shift to assisted living? Someone's 60-something kids after mom and dad has finally gone aloft, as my English granny would have said? The tchotchkes cramming the antique shop that I stroll through with my son, ivory-handled button hooks, cameo pins, tureens with porcelain peacock tails for handles. Before she died, my husband's mother begged him to take the claw-footed, 8-foot-tall armoire he hated. At 70, my mother labeled every object in her house, color-coded for each daughter. She wanted to know which one of us would wear her ruby ring, her jade necklace, and her turquoise bracelet. Where will my granny's silver trays, salt cellars, and teapots go? What about my mother's copy-tattered, water-stained copy of Just So stories? Oh, best beloved, the 1924 collection of poems my father cradled when he read aloud at dinner, will those end up on my son's shelves, or at a half-price bookstore, a garage sale, or eBay, or a landfill? A friend says we spend the first quarters of our lives accumulating the final quarter, disposing. As a kid, I treasured my doll-sized china tea sets, which were packed with crumpled tissue paper in a tape box, and they fell off the back of our truck one time when moving from one house to another. Like my photo albums of the 60s that the movers never found, no pictures left of my black mascara-lashed, mini-skirted, leggy self, no images of my tennis-playing lover. I've read about bower birds who attract their mates with shiny pebbles and trinkets rescued from trash bins. Did one of my tiny teacups end up in some bird's bower? Sometimes I crave bare walls, windows open wide to the sky, the oaks, mesquite, and sumac. But who am I? Without my journals of the past 20 years, my embroidered needle case, the filigree glass my husband gave me, empty as if coming into this world or preparing to leave. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. And I invite you now to join with us in our hymn of contemplation, number 123, Spirit of Life.
Unto
So recently, an old friend visited me. She'd never seen my house, and I admit that I was flattered when she said, "Oh, I just love your house. The decoration is so you. I love your taste." And then she began commenting on individual pieces in the house, and as she noted each object, I was struck by just how many things had originally belonged to someone else, and we just happened to end up with them. My dining room is a really good example of this. Our table belonged to my Aunt Jean, and the chairs, which don't match, were my mother's. My aunt's chairs were no good, and my mother's table was no good, so I put them together. The sideboard was my mother's, as well as the grandfather clock on the mantle, or the grandfather clock that we have in the corner, and then the mantle clock was a wedding present to my grandparents in 1930. The painting over the sideboard is a winter scene that Michael's grandmother actually painted, and there's also a silver tea set, which was Michael's great-grandmother's, and that sits on a side table by the window. And his other grandmother's candlesticks are on the table. The room is also cluttered with family tchotchkes. One such item is, my sisters and I always called it the dogs. It's a knick-knack that's been around my entire life. It's a mold of 3 dogs all together. You don't see things like that anymore. And on the bottom it says, "Made and Occupied Japan." I never remember it not being around. And the same thing goes for the pink pigs. My grandmother got them at Bucci's Furniture Store in Elbridge in the 1950s. And when she bought them, there was a mother pig and 8 little babies. But when my cousins were little, they used to like to take the babies home. So by the time I came along, there were only 2 babies left. And somewhere along the line after I got it, one of the babies got lost. So now I just have the mother and 1 baby. I also have got my grandmother's duck. It was one of those knickknacks that you used to see all the time, but probably haven't been made in 60 years, where the backs are hollowed out, and I think they're made that way so that they can be planters. And she used to keep her rosary beads and her prayer cards and her emery board in there, and somehow along the line they got lost. But so now I just have the duck. And in my foyer, there's a spinet desk that's also been around for my entire life. It was another wedding present that my grandparents received in 1930. I got a lot of things from 1930 in my house. It's actually mahogany, but they gave it to my parents in the 1960 when they bought their first house. And as was the fashion at the time, my mother antiqued it. So it's black with gray or gold streaks through it. And then in the 1990s, she repainted it black, and then she stenciled flowers on it. I've had it since 2013 when my mother died, and I considered stripping off all the paint several times and restoring that original mahogany finish. But I can't bring myself to get rid of the stencils that my mother put on there with her own hands. As it exists right now, it's a piece of history. If I refinished it, it would no doubt be classier looking and probably worth more money. But all of the evidence that it belonged to multiple generations would be lost, and it wouldn't look the way I have been used to seeing it look since the 1960s. Whenever I look at this desk, I am transported back to a time when I was 3 years old, and I used to sit in the brown chair next to this desk and hold our new kitten, Blair. And then I have the most sacred object of all, the most sacred object that exists in my mother's family, the telephone cat. Back when my mother was growing up and telephones sat in the front foyer on specially designed telephone stands, this cat, another one of those hollowed out knickknacks that was meant to put a plant in the back of, that always sat by the telephone in my grandparents' house. And when my grandmother died, there was a lot of tension over who was going to get the telephone cat. My Aunt Jean was the oldest, so she won. And when she died, my mother was very careful to quickly let my cousins know that it was her turn to have the telephone cat. And then when my mother died, let me tell you, there was even more tension over the telephone cat, as my sisters and my cousins and I all sort of wanted it. It was kind of decided that I had been the closest to my grandmother, so I ended up getting it. But it's such a sacred object that I don't dare have it out someplace where it could be broken, so it's in the china cabinet. And several members of the family's next generation have already made it clear to me that they want the telephone cat when I die. So as I escorted my friend through the house and I gave her all these histories of each item that she commented on, I realized that while flattering, her compliment on my taste was fairly inaccurate. And it was mostly undeserved. It struck me that what she saw as a deliberately executed decorating plan instead was simply the distilled accumulation of 60 years of living. I hadn't really decorated my house at all. Instead, my life and Michael's life had decorated the house for us. And by extension, the people that we have known all along the way were the real decorators. For it was their deliberate choices that resulted in these items finding their way into our home. And yet, these things are such a part of us that our house would not be home without them. And I'm sure as I'm telling this story, we all have similar memories and we all have similar objects in our houses, things that we probably would not have chosen in a store, but are nonetheless a part of our lives. After my friend left that day, I began reflecting more and more on this insight. The insight that I hadn't really decorated the house at all, but my life had done it for me. And it occurred to me that the decoration of my house, and of most of our houses probably, was really a metaphor for our very lives themselves. In a highly individualistic culture like ours, which places such a great emphasis on free will, autonomy, and the ability to make choices, I think we lose sight of just how little of our lives and how little of how they turn out is really the result of conscious, deliberate choice, and how much of it is really the result of circumstances that we find ourselves in. For many years, our school hosted an event every year where Holocaust survivors would come and they would speak and they would tell their stories to the students. And I wish I had thought to remember the name of my favorite speaker, and I did some searching online to see if I could figure it out, and I couldn't. But I heard her story several years in a row, and every year that I heard her story, it fascinated me. So since I couldn't retrieve her name for the purposes of storytelling, I will call her Ellen. Ellen was a young nurse when World War II broke out. And I can't recall whether Ellen was from Germany or Poland, but it was one of those two places. But she somehow ended up in the Netherlands, initially believing that that would be a safe place for Jewish refugees. However, she wasn't there very long, and she soon learned that that was actually not the case, and she needed to escape right away because she was in danger. Now, as I recall, she was working with a doctor at the time who offered her a solution. He was able to arrange for her to take a job with a doctor in one of the Dutch African colonies as long as she left right away. And the plan was that Ellen would wait out the war working in this clinic with this doctor, and then after the war she could return to Europe and kind of get on with her life. So she traveled by ship, which I recall, and I kind of did look this up to see, took several weeks. The doctor that she was going to work with was supposed to meet her at the ship. And when she arrived, he was there, indeed waiting for her. However, he had some very startling news. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about your visa," he told her, as soon as they got in the car. "I've done some research, though, and the only way that you can stay legally in this country is if you are my wife. Otherwise, I have to put you right back on that ship and you have to go right back to the Netherlands." So Ellen obviously was quite stunned by this news. She had come to this place expecting that she could work as a nurse and decide her destiny after the war was over. And now she suddenly had a huge life-altering circumstance thrown at her. "There's more," the doctor told her. "We have to be married within 24 hours. In order for you to be allowed to legally stay here." And before Ellen had a chance for that to sink in, he added, "Oh, and by the way, it's Friday. So if we don't do it today, we would have to wait until Monday, and then you would be over the 24-hour period that's allowed. So we have to get married right now." I've made all of the arrangements and we're on our way to the license bureau. So imagine you just get off the boat and this is your destiny. So feeling that she had no other choice but to go along with this sudden turn of events, Ellen agreed to marry the doctor. They headed off to the license bureau, they had their ceremony, and within a few hours of them having met, they were married. Now, I do recall, because I heard this several times, she came several years in a row, and I do recall that every time Ellen would tell this story, she would always pause a little bit when she got done telling this part. She knew that the question on everyone's mind was, what happened next? How did this work out? And she was a good enough storyteller that she understood that letting people ponder this question for themselves for a minute would make the rest of her story have more impact. I recall that the first time I heard this story and I was pondering during that pause that she left for us, my assumption was that Ellen and the doctor probably simply played along with the government and were married in name only for the duration of the war, and then the marriage probably dissolved after the war and they went their separate ways. I'm guessing that Ellen anticipated that this is what people were probably expecting too, and thus that was one of the reasons why she would put this dramatic pause into the story before she finished. When she felt she had paused long enough, she would say, "He turned out to be a pretty good guy. We were married for 64 years and we had 4 children." So I don't remember all the twists and turns of the story, but I do know that Ellen and her husband they found their way somehow here to Rochester, and they lived in Brighton where they raised their children, and her husband worked as a physician. So it was an unexpectedly happy ending to a story that could have taken lots of dark turns. So in a very real sense, Ellen's whole life happened to her by mistake. She didn't plan any of this out. She obviously did not anticipate when she was growing up that she would someday have to flee her country of origin because she was Jewish. She had no way of knowing when she went to the Netherlands that she wouldn't be able to stay there either. And she certainly could never, ever have anticipated having to marry a complete stranger the moment she stepped off a boat in a foreign land. And yet sometimes, as happens in books and movies, sometimes people get happy endings, and in her case, she got a very happy ending. Now, Ellen never said this that I recall in the times that I heard her repeat the story, but I'm sure that at some point she must have wondered how her life would have turned out if it had not been for all of these dramatic and unforeseen circumstances. The story is a great example, probably the best one I've ever seen, that illustrates the line and the point that John Lennon makes in the song Beautiful Boy when he says, "Life is what happens to you when you are busy making other plans." And this is something that we've all, I'm sure, pondered before. And part of my message today is, of course, to reflect on and celebrate all of these happy accidents and unforeseen circumstances that we've all found ourselves in, which nonetheless shape the very lives that we live. We would not be who we are today if these things hadn't happened to us. Unlikely friendships that have resulted from being thrown together by chance with people who are nothing like us. Jobs we took thinking they were only going to be temporary, which ended up being lifelong careers. Cities we moved to with the initial intention of staying a short time until we got a degree or fulfilled some other short-term goal, which nonetheless ended up becoming our lifelong homes. Stray pets which showed up at the most inconvenient times in our lives, which ended up becoming beloved companions. Churches that we agreed to attend once for the sake of a loved one becoming our permanent spiritual homes. As many of you have probably heard, I found Unitarian Universalism this way. I was a member of the gay and lesbian student group at Syracuse University when May Memorial Unitarian Universalist Church asked for a group of us to come to speak to the 8th graders who were doing at the time, About Your Sexuality curriculum in RE. Now, that cold and snowy morning, it was February and it was bitter cold and it had snowed a lot the night before. And I really just wanted to stay in bed. I really had no desire to go to some weird sounding church with a cult-like name where I was sure that people were going to instantly try to indoctrinate me into some sort of mind control. Okay, so I think the end of that story is obvious. What I thought was going to be merely a tiresome chore for one morning became a lifelong spiritual path, as well as for me, an important career choice. We all have many, many happy accidents in our past, and it's good to be reminded of them once in a while and to hold them in gratitude for a moment. Taking time to reflect on this universal phenomenon of the human condition can reframe our view of ourselves, and it can help us renew our gratitude, reframe our regrets, and make us feel more prepared for those unexpected leaps we are all going to have to make in the future. But there's another valuable spiritual lesson for taking time to reflect on this phenomenon as well. It can also deepen our compassion for other people when we hold in awareness the idea that people that find themselves in difficult circumstances rarely, if ever, chose those circumstances. And thus, people do not, quote unquote, deserve what happens to them when things go wrong. So, to illustrate that, let's revisit Ellen's story for a minute. I think the thing that we all love about the story so much is that it has such a surprise, happy ending to it. So very, very much could have gone wrong in that situation. And if it had, Ellen would not have been any more to blame for what went wrong than she was responsible for how it actually did turn out. So obviously, it's quite possible that an opportunity to leave the Netherlands would never have presented itself in the first place, and then her fate would have been up to the Nazis. But let's assume that she did get the opportunity to travel to Africa, did meet the doctor, and did have to marry him right away. But let's suppose that it went this way instead. Instead of being the kind, generous, good man that he actually was, what if this doctor instead had been an alcoholic with a misogynist streak and control issues? In this scenario, the first night of the marriage, maybe he had gotten really drunk and had forced her to perform her wifely duties before she was ready. She might have tried to rebel at one point and been slapped. So she's brand new in a foreign country. She's got no connections to anyone and no credibility with anyone there. And he's the respected doctor that everyone knows. Who would believe her even if she tried to get help? And so it would go on from there. He was regularly drunk, regularly beat her, and before she knew it, she had 4 children to take care of. Fatherhood, by the way, only made his temperament worse. He was annoyed by little children, had no interest in spending time with them, and he expected Ellen to keep them out of his hair at all times. Meanwhile, Ellen had been brought there to work as a nurse, so he still expected her to work while she raised the children. So she's working in the clinic and trying to raise 4 children, and she's expected to cook and clean every day because he likes a neat house. Being the control freak that this fictional doctor was, he would fly into a rage when the house wasn't clean enough or when his shirts weren't ironed correctly. And when these things happened, Ellen could count on being slapped around a little bit. So Ellen would have no one to turn to in this situation. She wouldn't know anyone in the village other than patients of the clinic who all hold her husband in high esteem. Her own family was in a concentration camp in Germany, so there was no help coming from them. And a war and an ocean separated her from everyone else that she knew. So when the war ends, Ellen, let's say, tries to escape this abusive marriage, only to learn that the laws of this Dutch colony grant all parental rights to the father. So if she wants to leave, she'll have to abandon her children. So she ends up staying, raising her 4 children in this oppressive environment because escape really is not an option for her. Eventually, when her children are grown, she finds an opportunity to make her way back to Germany. She hasn't been there in 50 years, though. Her family of origin all died in the camps, and any friends that she may have had once have all been scattered to the four winds. Alone in a place that, yes, while it was once home, is now every bit as strange as the Dutch colony had been in the 1940s, struggling with severe PTSD, perhaps Ellen develops a drinking problem. It's the only way that she can find to cope with all of the pain that her life has accumulated. Do you think we'd want to hear her story then? Would she be invited to speak at schools as a Holocaust survivor? Or would people simply not want to hear it? Would the same people who cheered when they heard her happy story and marveled at its unexpectedly happy ending instead have said things like, well, what did she expect? That's what happens when you marry someone that you don't even know. I'm sure she could have found a way to leave that country if she really wanted to. I would never have put up with that. No man would ever control me like that. In my observation, it's human nature to praise people who have good circumstances. We praise those people because we assume that they made all good choices. And we condemn those with bad circumstances because we make the same assumption. We think that they have chosen all of those bad circumstances that they had. How many times have we heard people say things like, well, she made a lot of bad choices. So again, let's ask the question again. How much of what happens to us is really the result of our choices, and how much, like the decorations in my house, is simply what happens to us instead? I've done a lot of weddings, and I can assure you that every couple who gets married intends to have a happy, successful marriage. Everyone who gives birth intends to be a good parent and to raise a happy, successful child. Everyone who embarks on a college education expects to end that journey with a degree and a career. No one plans on getting divorced. No one sets out to raise an unhappy child. No one tries to flunk out of school or blow their certification exam. And in this same way, no one asks to be abused or traumatized. No one tries to get cancer. No one strives toward having severe depression. No one sets a goal for themselves of being an alcoholic or a drug addict or getting a DUI. And yes, in many cases it can be argued that people make deliberate choices, but are these really completely free choices made with careful planning and forethought by people who feel strong and empowered and freely able to choose any path they want? Or are they the result, perhaps instead, of stresses that we can't appreciate? Traumas that we don't know anything about, or limitations that we don't see? Are we born truly as blank slates with the free will and autonomy to choose any path we want to follow? I think all of the teachers in the room already know the answer to that question, and we understand how much a child's circumstances can affect their success. So, do we have all of this free will when we're born? Or are our lives more like my dining room, comprised of the accumulation of entanglements and circumstances, divorces that we didn't see coming, that shook us to the core, pregnancies that surprised us at the worst possible moment, but yielded in the end more joys and sorrows than we ever thought we were capable of experiencing, accidents that permanently derailed us and forever altered our view of what was and was not possible, successes that we didn't expect that took our lives into suddenly new directions that we never anticipated, talents we never knew that we had until some adversity brought them out in us, unlikely friendships we never could have predicted but now can't imagine our lives being without, tragedies and traumas we never fully recovered from, limitations in ourselves and others that we never could have predicted even existed. And yes, at times, even choices that we never thought we would ever have to make, but that circumstances nevertheless rendered inevitable. This is the stuff that every single human life is made of. In so very, very many ways, our lives are never really our own to create and control. Instead, they are vessels that we inhabit. They are shaped by eternal forces, other people's choices, and our own unexpected experiences. Now, there are two gifts, in my opinion, in this insight. Looking at things this way frames the good things that have happened in our lives as blessings, sometimes even small miracles that strengthen and enhance our sense of gratitude and of humility. And at the same time, this viewpoint also informs and deepens our empathy and our compassion, both for others and, by the way, also for ourselves. None of us earned or asked for the disappointments or devastations that nonetheless are part of every single human story. Like the decorations in my house, they are just a piece of a story that is larger than ourselves and lengthier than our lifespans. And we couldn't ever separate or parse them, ever, and still be who we are. For the first time in a decade, I'm not teaching summer school this year. So like any good Catholic school alum, there's a lot of us here today, aren't there? Yeah. I feel the need to use that time nonetheless productively. So I've spent some time sorting my attic. And last week I encountered a long forgotten chair. Now it's not my taste at all. I never would have chosen this chair in a furniture store. But like so many of the things I have, I didn't choose it. My grandmother chose it in 1979, when after the death of my grandfather, she sold her home of 40-plus years and moved into a modern apartment building. And the chair is appropriately modern for that era. And I think it was reflective of her desire to try to forge a fresh start for herself after losing the love of her life. I never liked I remember the day she brought it home and I just thought, oh, okay. She was very excited about the chair, but I never liked it. When she died, my favorite great aunt Aggie took the chair, and she had it for 10 years. When Aggie was diagnosed with cancer, the entire extended family used to visit her every Thursday night, and I think at one point or another, every member of my extended family has sat in that chair at one time or another. And when Aggie died, my mother took the chair, and she had it recovered in fabric that I like even less than the original fabric that it came with. And my mother had it for 23 years. It is badly in need of recovering, and the springs in the bottom have to be fixed. So I gave a lot of serious consideration to just throwing it in the garbage. But something deep in my soul could not bring myself to do that, so I've made a decision. Instead, I am going to have it reupholstered and repaired, but I am going to make sure that the third set of fabric to grace this 1980s frame is one that I actually like. And now I invite you to join in my favorite hymn and the entire hymnal, number 354, We Laugh, We Cry.
Feel
Please remain standing as Tom Williams extinguishes our chalice flame this morning, and let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. As we close our service this morning, I invite you to place again a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces of those here with you. And those of us in the room, let's take a moment to look around at everyone who is here this morning. For those who came before us, we offer gratitude and thanks. For those whose paths have crossed our own, we honor the way they enriched our lives in ways we could never have predicted. May these memories and connections be a blessing. May we feel surrounded by their love. As we go forth from this time and place, let us be inspired by their courage, their wisdom, and their dreams. Let us honor them by doing the work of living boldly, loving mightily, and creating heaven on earth. Amen. Blessed be. And everyone is invited to join us at the coffee hour immediately after the service in the Clara Barton Lounge, or if you are online, there is an online coffee hour in the Zoom. We hope to see everyone there.